Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks. If you can start with a bit of an introduction, that'd be great.
Okay. Hello, my name is Naphtali Bryant. I currently work as a specialist in student success at St. Philip's College in San Antonio, Texas. I graduated from the very same school. I have my associates of applied science and business management and technology with a concentration in customer service from that school.
Great.
Also, one of our sister schools, I have an associate of applied science and business management. And so currently what I do in the higher ed space is basically help students with the enrollment process. My particular area is to take in things like transcripts, some holds. Our office actually puts on the entire graduation ceremony, everything from decorating the venue to handing out the cap and gowns to conferring
Okay.
the degrees. So
Wow. Wow. Okay.
that's the office I work in. That's what I do right now.
Okay. Interesting. So, I don't know much about that whole process, really. Certainly not in the States. So, is that a fairly normal thing that you're doing, or is it something? Is that something that all regions, all universities have somebody like you doing the things you do, or are you catering to a particular type of student or a particular background, or what?
Well, most, if not all, universities have what they call the enrollment process. It may
Right.
go from taking like a placement test, but if you're coming from high school to college, they want to look at your transcript. If you're
Mm-hmm.
coming from one college to another college, they want to look at your transcript. So most schools have somebody that does that.
Right.
Where
Okay.
we may differ is sometimes it's records and the registrar's office that does it.
Sure.
Some
I see.
places it's admissions that does it. Our office actually does more the transcript stuff. The admissions office more does residency and shot records, test, enrollment, recruitment. They do more of that side. So
Okay. I see.
that may change or that may switch what roles depending on the university or the college.
Okay. Okay. And the students that you're working with, what kind of schools are they coming from? Do you just anybody that's applying to that college, you're dealing with them, or is there a particular segment of the student population that you're working with?
Well, right now it's been just basically anybody that applies. We do have a
Hmm.
program called what we're calling Alamo Promise, where we're trying to literally get all of San Antonio to be able to get a stipend or a scholarship to actually go to our college for free. It's a
Okay.
pilot program that we're doing. Normally, it's for low income schools or places where there's low
Right.
income
Okay.
population to try to get them into school because our urban core is the poorest in the United States. People don't know
Oh,
that.
really? Okay. Okay.
So in order to combat poverty, what we're trying to do is give people access to higher ed or get a credential. So we do it
Hmm.
on that side. And then we also have like a workforce, manufacturing, a medical department so that students can literally just go from our school, which is a 2-year school, not the big 4-year university,
I
and
see.
go
Okay.
straight into the middle class. We would be considered a junior college.
Hmm.
So you would basically graduate from us from your with an associate's degree, which is your
Right.
freshman and your sophomore year.
Yeah,
And
I see.
depending on what you're doing, some people now, because of the cost, are what they're calling reverse transfer. So they're transferring back to us because they're realizing that our cost point or our price point is far less cheaper for the very same class that you're taking in that level at universities. So
Right.
that
I see.
that kind of change is happening, especially because of COVID.
Yeah, I see. So when you say it, does that mean people would have signed up for a 4-year degree at a bigger college and then decided to switch to the 2-year degree
Yes,
with
in
you?
some
Yeah. Okay.
instances.
I see.
Yeah,
I see. Okay.
and we have
Okay.
partnerships,
Yeah. Go on.
so it's fairly seamless, especially
Uh-huh.
with the local schools. It's not that bad.
Okay.
Now, when you go from like out of the state, then getting your transcript or what credits you took and do we recognize them? Do they recognize ours? It can get a little complicated, but for
Yeah.
the most part, in our area, it's fairly seamless.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, I found as I mentioned before, I don't have a lot of familiarity with the US system,
Mhm.
but I'm just finalizing really a partnership with a US college. So I'm just kind of beginning to get my head around some of the systems so that I can make sure that the deal works for both of us.
Mhm.
And it seems like it can be a bit messy. in the US, I don't see, and maybe you can speak to this a bit. I don't see a solid framework the way I'm from the UK.
Mhm.
Now I live out here in Indonesia, but it's the UK system that I'm quite familiar with. And I've always felt that we have a pretty good kind of framework of qualifications, of credits, and so things are fairly transferable. It
Mhm.
seems from what little interaction I've had in the last couple of months with the US system that it's not quite so well laid out. Does that sound true to you, or am I missing something?
It's a little bit of both. So like if your major university has a partnership with that junior college, a lot of that has been kind of ironed out. The
Right,
problem
between the two
becomes
institutions.
between the two
Uh-huh.
institutions, right? The problem becomes when you're coming from maybe one region of the country to a whole nother region.
Right,
That can get a little dicey.
right.
And like for instance, English 1301, which is your basic college English,
Mm-hmm.
is theoretically the same for everybody.
Uh-huh.
But if you don't code it correctly, or if you don't put the right description, then the student, not the school, not either school, the student then can get into a point where they have to put in more paperwork to prove
Right,
that
I
they
see.
took that class.
Right.
So it can be,
Yeah, yeah.
it, there's probably a way that they could fix it, but it's the will to do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
depending on the state, because even each state has its own, for high school graduation, sometimes has their own credentials. There's certain stuff you have to take.
Right,
uh,
okay.
Texas may have a more rigorous thing than Arizona. And
I
then
see.
what happens if you're coming from Arizona to a Texas school? Do they
Mm-hmm.
recognize, it should be with the Department of Education seamless, but when you start private colleges and
Yeah, right,
public
right.
colleges and endowments and all that, the money kind of messes it up a little bit.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I wonder how much of it as well. You've mentioned there different regions of the country, and of course, I'm again reminded that it's the United States, and you've got
Right.
state again in the UK less of an issue. I mean, we've got some of that, but obviously it's not like having dozens of states all kind of functioning somewhat independently. I imagine that's part of the problem.
It is. Um, it is, and it really depends on like the state and local governments.
Hmm.
And part of that is just historic. In New York, they did certain things than they did in Texas. And so
Right.
you kind of built your educational process
Hmm.
from the Department of Education, but you added maybe more agriculture in the South than you did in the North.
I see.
In the West, in California, you may add more IT or STEM than you
Yeah.
do
Right.
in the Northwest. So it should be, even though we do have a centralized Department of Education with
Hmm.
certain criteria, there's to a certain extent too much leeway, but that could be a blessing and a curse. It really depends
Right.
on, so it's something that needs to be ironed out. But the problem is there's profitability in those wrinkles.
Sure.
So if you iron it out, there's somebody based on the way the system is that's going to win and somebody's going to
Yeah,
lose.
someone's always
So it's not
benefiting
going
it.
to be,
Right.
yeah, it's not going
Yeah,
to be
yeah, yeah.
equitable. So the way
Hmm.
they have it now is the closest way they can get it equitable, but a lot of that depends on who's in what office.
Right, sure. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a fairly global fact, I think, yeah.
Yep.
I wonder then as well, to what extent the school experience for students, I mean, I don't know if you have much, familiarity with this,
Mhm.
but again, different states, school systems in different states around the country, is the experience for students different going to school in different states, and what they're learning and what kind of school experience they're having? Does that differ much state to state?
It can. It really can. It based on the way especially public schools are funded,
Mm, okay.
then that basically tells you if you're in a poorer
Yeah,
city,
sure.
you probably, now the curriculum might be similar,
Right.
but you may go into a classroom and there's 30 seats and there's wooden chairs and all that
Right.
type
Yeah.
of stuff at one school. You may go across the city and at another school, they've got laptops for every
Right.
student
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all that type of stuff. So the curriculum for the most part is the same. The
Hmm.
experience really depends on, unfortunately, where you live.
Yeah. Sure. And you mentioned already that um, the poorer contingent of your region is suffering particularly badly with that. How much do you think that that has to do with education? Are there is there a low level of education amongst that population? Is there school dropouts and things like that, or is it more of a broader economic problem?
It's more of a broader economic problem. The one that we were having issues with, the one of the larger school districts, and I'm talking K through 12, they've improved their numbers dramatically. They went
Yeah.
from like a C grade to almost an A grade
Oh wow.
nationally.
Wow.
So
Wow.
they've grown that way. But what happened is just flat out resources. So in that
Hmm.
area, there's a thing way back right after post slavery and all that other type of stuff. They call it redlining, where they literally
Okay.
would carve city blocks out, and they on purpose would devalue that property
Right.
when African Americans or Latinos or whatever were going to that neighborhood. Then when they quote unquote destroyed, or the roads were messed up, it's not necessarily because of the people, it's because the value of the property was already diminished. Then what happened was a lot of those people start moving out.
Hmm.
Wealthy people start coming in and driving up the cost of that property. So
Right.
by the time they drive up the cost of that property, the schools have already been so underfunded. The
Right.
you know the infrastructure has been so underfunded. That's going to take another 20, 30, 50 years
Sure.
for it to redo what just happened. And so because
Right.
of that, especially with like COVID, what COVID proved was something that people probably didn't realize was the digital divide. When you're going to school, and for a lot of those parents, school was both school and daycare.
Yeah. Right.
So
True.
now that they were doing that, if you had internet at home and everything, it was only for a couple of hours. Your
Hmm.
student can get on there and do all that type of stuff. But now that you're the parent and you've got to use the family computer, what does the student have?
Yeah.
Or your
Yeah.
bandwidth is not, commensurate for you and that child to be on VPN or remote work or whatever for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Your provider wasn't birthed or wasn't bandwidth for that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's starting to come out now. Now the governments, local governments, it's another thing. Local governments from the United States to the state to the city, there's pipelines to get money, but some of them they're not politically connected enough, I guess I could say,
Oh, yeah. Okay. I see.
with the federal government or
They're
the
not getting what they
governor.
could be getting.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
And so the cities now have to do stuff on their own, or they have to make plans on their own without seeking state or federal dollars. So that's kind of making a difference too. In San Antonio, we've got something that, because we have so many people that got laid off, that we're starting a bunch of workforce programs in the sister colleges that I'm at. We're actually going to be able to educate with a stipend like 50% of the people
Yeah.
in San
Wow.
Antonio that lost their job, so that they can get a skill, a credential, and a job after that. So there's some positive stuff happening,
Hmm.
but you would think, especially not living in the United States, that it should be better. And the truth is, it should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. There's a lot there that's interesting, actually. That questions I have. I'm interested in some of the personal experiences of this as well. So you've mentioned
Mhm,
the politicians and how they may not be as connected
mhm,
as perhaps in other areas, and so they're not getting for their region. They're not getting all the resources they could be getting, perhaps. In an area that is more, uh, say, underprivileged, an area that's got more poverty in it, the politicians that are governing those areas,
mhm.
is there generally a sense that the politicians are representative of the people? Are they from that kind of background, or is there a class gap between the people who are in politics and the people who are, you know, being affected by the politics?
Um, there's a possibility. So one of the things that can be a detriment to our politics is that people will use their address to run for office
Right,
in that
right.
spot. But if you have more than one, real estate
Oh, right. I
property,
see. Yeah. Okay.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in some extent, there's some people that, like, when you get to your school boards or you get to your college boards, a lot of those, maybe even city council people, may actually live in that specific district. When
Right.
it gets a little bit higher, going up to the state government,
Sure.
they may be in that district, but the district may be so wide
It's got a lot of
that if
different
they're
demographics.
right, so
Yeah,
if
I
they
see.
may be leaning on the more middle class or wealthier side. Some of them do come from that side. I think
Hmm.
what happens a lot of times is they get elected and they don't set up accountability structures when they get back to their district.
Right.
So they're talking for the people, but they haven't talked to the people since they got
Right.
elected.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
when
Right.
you have people like that, then no, it's not representative.
Sure.
There are a lot that do, but because either the ones that don't have so much power, or because stuff is not working, they get labeled as people that are not, not doing
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it really depends on where you're at, who's actually in your district or whatever
Hmm.
that you're
Hmm.
representing, because there are some people that are really big advocates and that will hold you accountable. But if they're impoverished, do I hold you accountable or do I go to work? And so
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that decision that you make,
Yeah. Of
because
course.
your food, you may want change for the future, but if you're hungry today,
Today. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it really just depends.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then you mentioned redlining as well, which is a
Mhm.
concept that um, I've heard of, but
Mhm.
only through media about the US. I've not lived it. I've not, I'm not close to it. The way that you described it, um, I would take from that the people who are in those districts, they've suffered twice now, because the redlining, as it was implemented at the time, which is what I'm loosely familiar with, and the way you've just described it, obviously there's a direct prejudice against people living in a certain area, or turning that area into a particular
Mhm.
type of district. But as you then talked about, essentially a gentrification, I suppose, right? As people, wealthier families moving in, prices going up. So the people who are already living there at some point presumably can't afford to stay there. If the people who are moving into the area are pushing the prices up, are people then, the people who were stuck there before, are they then being displaced? Are they being forced out because they can't afford to stay there? I mean, what's happening with those people who are the poorer people living in a poor area? That area is becoming wealthier as more wealthy people move in. What happens to the people who were there before?
They normally just get pushed out.
Mm. And
Like
to where?
there's a thing called eminent domain. Well, literally, depending on where you're at, if they first try to buy you out, and
Right.
normally it's at market value, but
Mm-hmm.
again, the person that's coming in is going to make, let's say your house is $100,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
The person coming in is planning on buying that property, maybe possibly building something else that may be worth $300,000-400,000,
Yeah.
and then it gets pushed up. Then once that happens, the next door neighbor, the next door neighbor, the next
Mm-hmm.
door neighbor,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's just if you own the house. If you're in apartment complexes, or what they used to call the projects,
Yeah.
they make everybody get out of there, and they literally tear down the project, rebuild something similar,
Right.
um,
But at a
but
higher
then they
market.
screen who they put in it. Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And now,
So then,
it depending on the city and where it's at, it takes a little while to take effect. So they don't go and take 25 square blocks. They plan
mm-hmm.
for it, but that 25 square blocks may take them 10, 15, 20 years
Right.
to actually implement their entire plan. But
Sure.
literally, once they put one in, it just depends. Most of your sports arenas, because of the value of the property, is in a poorer neighborhood. So what they do
Right. Okay.
is the city puts people out, because a lot of those, the NFL, the NBA, a lot of those
Mm.
teams, they don't own the stadium.
Right. Okay.
What they do is they'll go and take tax money to build the stadium. So when they take
Right.
tax
Okay.
money to build the stadium, they'll put a bond or something like that. Then what the city does is say, well, we're looking at revenue coming in, so let's get, quote unquote, the unvaluable property out of there, which is really
Which is
people,
people. Yeah. Cracking. Yeah. Yeah.
so that we can build a valuable piece of property. And that if we ever, for the city or the team or whatever decides to sell it, it's, quadruple what it was worth, because they didn't pay anything for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And then because some of the education is property taxed, some of that property tax money goes to that. So if the property value is down, then there's no real funding for the education in that sector. So they lose probably, those people probably lose 4 times, because that redlining has been since, almost a century. So there may be families like, 4 or 5 generations that were affected by it. And because they didn't own their house, or their house, even now, there's people that not necessarily that their neighborhood was redlined, but if the appraiser doesn't like, is a racist or something, I don't know if there's any laws, but they can come in, devalue your house because they see African American or whatever artifacts, and literally they don't look at the structure of the house, they don't look at the plumbing, everything is in pristine shape. But because they don't think that it would sell because an African American and a Latino lived in there, they devalue the price. So even in we're talking about United States, how to get the wealth gap to be a little closer. Yeah. The problem with that is we're pushing education, but it's not education. It's literally the highest investment for most Americans is their home. It's not education. Right. Yeah. So if you devalue their highest investment, everything else is lowered.
Of course, yeah. So then you're working to get more people into college, in a way that they can afford to, basically, right? Do you have any sense yet? Have you seen any impacts, or do you have any sense of how much impact there is on, say, an individual or a family, for the kid that goes to college versus the kid that doesn't? I mean, you must be presumably dealing with a lot of like first generation college students. So how do you see those? Do you see much of or not do you see, but can you describe any kind of tangible impact on what these kids are getting, out of going to college compared to those that haven't had that opportunity?
The most tangible is, it's not the books. It's not really the credential if they did it right. It's the experience that they have. Sometimes when you're in impoverished neighborhoods, that's the only place you stay. So you don't even know what the rest of your city looks like, let alone what the rest of the country and the world looks like. So it kind of broadens your view of what is possible. I think the problem is because when you're first generation, a lot of times you're pushed to just go to college, which is great. But what you do in the halls and outside the classroom in the college is the real key to success.
Yeah, because that motivation's coming from other people rather than from the student. Yeah, right.
Right. And there's a level of ignorance where the parents or the family, they just don't know. All they know is that they've heard that if you have a college degree, which is statistically correct, you will make a certain amount over your life. What they don't tell you is if you were already in poverty as first generation student, depending on your school choice and depending on how you went through college, you went negative poverty. So you went to school and got in more debt and more poverty than you did before you went. Yeah. So if you're going to do that and you don't work the halls, as I call it, the right way, if you're not connecting with people, if you don't know who to give your resume to, if you don't know how to write a resume, if you don't know, for instance, what you're studying, if it's even a viable career in the next 10 years, it may be great now, but is it viable in 10 years? Then while it's a good leg up, it can also be an anvil or anchor, because
it's just a rash decision.
You may get to a spot and stay there. So it really depends on school choice. If you pick the right school for the right price point, and then how much of your college experience that you can engulf yourself in. If you're just going to class and leaving the campus, you're not getting the full education. Right. The problem is a lot of those first generation students, they don't have the financial access to be able to stay on campus and be in student organizations, stuff like that. They go to campus, go to class, go to work.
Yeah, right. 2 or 3 jobs perhaps in the evenings.
2 or 3 jobs and all that other type of stuff. And you still get your credentials, so you may get some upward mobility. But there's still like a cap. Yeah, there's still a cap.
I wonder as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I wonder as well, you use that phrase work in the halls there.
Mhm.
Um, the colleges that you're working with in particular, and obviously you're a student of those colleges or a graduate of those colleges yourself, right? So you'll have a
Mhm.
first-hand experience of what those campuses are like. What
Mhm.
kind of demographic is there on campus with respect to these, the poorer students, the underprivileged students, the first generation students? When they go on campus, are they a large portion of the campus population, or are most of the students from uh, wealthier backgrounds? What's the makeup on campus like?
The makeup on campus, a lot of them, because there's our college and then there's four other sister colleges in the
Hmm.
city.
Hmm.
The makeup is normally non-traditional.
Okay.
So we have more non-traditional students, and non-traditional students are basically students that left high school, didn't go to college directly right after. They may have gotten a job or done some, went to military, whatever, and then came
Hmm.
back. We have a lot
Right.
of
Okay.
those coming back.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why they do that is because between the universities in town and what we offer to get a credential, which
Yeah.
for some of them, that may be 10, 15, $20,000 raise just because of that
Sure.
credential,
Sure.
we're cheaper. And so
Hmm.
because we're cheaper, they come back to us and say, well, let me
Yeah.
make the intelligent economic decision for my
Yeah.
education.
Yeah. Right.
So that there's that. Um, and then there's kids coming right out of high school. The problem that we have is because we're a junior college, there's a junior college and then there's community colleges.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
the
Okay.
education space, community college to a lot of people is like an elevated high school.
Hmm.
It's not really college.
Right.
So it's almost like you're marketed out of that better choice straight to the university. The
Yeah.
problem
Right.
is when you
Right.
get to the university, you're paying for a lot of stuff you're not using. You're paying for that football
Right. Of
team.
course.
You're
Yeah.
paying
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
that basketball team. At the community college, you're not because we don't have it.
Hmm.
It may
Right.
be
Yeah.
intramural, but you're not paying that fee.
Hmm.
And there's because people skip that, there's so many opportunities on our campuses. People just don't know.
Get
Either they
overlooked. Yeah.
don't know because we don't market it as well, which we probably could, or B, even if they knew they couldn't take advantage of it because they're not in the economic
Right.
space to be able
Yeah.
to say, okay, for me, I started getting enough scholarship and grants that I quit my
Mm.
job so I could be a
Okay.
full-time student.
Hmm.
So because I was a full-time student, I had all those opportunities to intern and study abroad and all that other type of stuff. A lot of our demographic doesn't have that opportunity, even though a lot of our fees are cheaper. So
Right.
when I went to Asia, when I went to Taiwan and China, there was a
Hmm.
group from UT Austin who we met at the Forbidden City. We were going in,
Okay.
they were coming in, we met. We were staying at 3-star hotels right down the street. They were staying in Chinese dorms. They
Right.
paid for the trip to stay the whole summer, almost 30,000, I think.
Hmm.
We paid
Hmm.
5,000, and all of us that was in our groups got scholarships. So most of us paid
Right.
maybe 500. So
Right.
it's just a matter of if they don't come from a good economic background and they don't get scholarships and they don't get
Hmm.
grants,
Hmm. Yeah.
all the opportunities in the world, they can't take advantage of them
Yeah.
because
Right.
they've got to eat today. They've got to pay
Yeah.
rent today.
Right. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what happens.
So that campus population is
Mhm.
interesting as well. It seems the way you've described it there. Again, my very distant
Mhm.
outside of you. It sounds like there might be a gift and a curse there. Because when I asked the question, because I thought, if you've got a lot of wealthier people on campus
Mhm.
and you've got some of these poorer people, getting their first opportunity to go to college, which is a great leg up for them. But if they then feel, underrepresented on campus, they might feel, not welcome, or they might not feel like they can schmooze. And as you said, talked about working the halls, they might not feel they can socialize. So that was the reason for my question. The way you've
Mhm.
described it sounds like perhaps that's not such a problem because there is a more kind of diverse makeup on campus. But then I wonder, if that's the case, does it mean, and you've already spoken about um, the community college model anyway, I mean, it presumably means that unfortunately, while they feel more at home on campus because there are more people like them on campus,
Mhm.
perhaps they're not getting the recognition, the credential from that campus because it's kind of a devalued campus in anyway. Does that sound right as well?
It does, and the reason why what happens is because we're a 2-year college.
Right.
When you get in education, the part I don't like is that when you're in education, if somebody's coming to your school, it should be the greatest school they ever come to, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a 2-year school and you can get your associates, but most of the jobs, whatever, are asking for bachelors, which they're
Yeah.
starting to kind of switch. If you're a 2-year school, you may set the pipeline to get to the 4-year degree, but you shouldn't be talking about it every day.
Yeah, it's not. It shouldn't be seen as a stepping stone. Yeah.
No, it shouldn't be seen as stepping stone. You should be able to provide enough
Yeah.
that if the student doesn't want to go there,
They've still got something worthwhile.
they still got something worthwhile. And I think sometimes in academia, we think that everybody subconsciously wants to get to the level we're at. Everybody doesn't want to be a doctor. Everybody doesn't want to have their master's, right? So what do you do with that student that doesn't? What do you do with that student that just wants their certificate? They literally just need, besides their driver's license and their name, they need a credential. Doesn't matter what it is. They just need something that says that they completed something to get a raise at work. What do you do with that student, right?
Yeah.
So you have that. Secondhand, I think a lot of the switch in demographics happens a lot of times at universities. And because they're so vast, some of these universities in the United States are basically cities.
Yeah, I see that.
Or literally the university and the city is built around the university, but the university is it. When you have that context, you tend to have more diverse people, and you tend to have more student organizations that can make you feel at home. But like I said, it really depends on, you know, where you're coming from, you know, your economics. And then sometimes you can get to a big university and just the fact that you went from a high school that maybe had 30 people in the school to now you're sitting in an auditorium with 300.
Yeah.
And that your professor is not really teaching you. It's a professor's aide that's teaching you.
Yeah.
If you're not
there's
really,
no relationship there anyway, right? There's
no relationship. They don't know you by name. They know you by a student ID number and all that other type of stuff. If you're not really ready for that, it can be overwhelming. Sure. And then the bigger the school, unfortunately, the more economics is in the education than it is the education that produces the economics. So like now, because college sports brings in so much revenue, there's schools right now that have had to close, you know, a college of business or whatever, because somebody had COVID and 1,400 people came down with it, but they'll still have the football game and they'll still have the stadium open because they need some of that revenue. And because they were used to that revenue paying for other stuff, now they're in a pickle. And if you're the student in the middle, you're really just a conduit. You're really just a pass through. Yeah. You're looking for a degree. They're looking for money. And so depending on where you're going, that can be an issue. Now, when you get to, I had the chance to go to Yale once for a conference. When you get somewhere like Yale or an Ivy League or one of those, you know, upper echelon schools in the world, then you've already probably been one of those students that was already the most exceptional in your school and your state or whatever like that. So now you feel a more kindred because all of the quote unquote weird people are all in the same space. So it really, you know, there's a little bit more connection in that. And then when you go to a school like Yale, you're going for the full education. You're not going just for the books.
No, of course.
Because the network that came out of Yale may be the reason why you got a job as opposed to just your education. That's exactly
right. Yeah, the parents involved, you know, all of the bigger peripheral networks as well. Whose parents and who's got a cousin on the board or whatever else, right?
And then a lot of times they groom you for that. If they didn't groom you before you got to that university, while you're there, they're grooming you for, hey, listen, this is here. This person was here. You have access to this person. So it really just depends. But education in the United States is financial first, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, that seems, I mean, I've been speaking with a few people lately, and I've kind of been using this term. I talk about the degree economy. And it seems to me that what once sort of began as a way of furthering education, right? Okay, we've got school, we've got the school model, and then there are people who want more than that. They want to learn more, they want to develop themselves, and so there's there's something on top of that, and that's a degree, and that's a great thing. But then as the colleges became more established, their goal was to grow. which is not the same
Hmm.
as saying, our goal is to provide an education to the people who want an education. Now our goal is to grow and become as big a campus, as bigger, as you say, some
Hmm.
of these campuses are like cities, they're empires, right?
Hmm.
And so then the colleges are building a whole economy around the degree.
Hmm.
They're working with the schools below and the employers afterwards to basically boost the value of that degree and say, the degree is, if you don't have a degree, right?
Yeah.
The position we're in now is if you don't have a degree, there's almost no employment opportunity open and available to you other than the lowest menial level jobs,
Hmm.
which is great for some, but a lot of people, they have aspirations for higher. If you want
Hmm.
anything more than that, you have to have the degree. But that
Right.
doesn't really, that doesn't come from a motivation of education saying, if you want this job, you need a particular level of education to be competent, so the degree. Because
Hmm.
most of these jobs don't need that. You don't
Right.
need 4 years in college reading textbooks to go and be a secretary in an office, or a personal assistant, or so many jobs, most business degrees, journalism, so many degrees that I can think of where that job does not require a 4-year academic study. But
Right.
the economy has been built by the colleges themselves to say, we want to make sure everybody gets a degree because, well, that's where
Hmm.
we get our money from.
Right.
And so, the community colleges
Hmm.
seem to me to be more about saying, we want to provide an education and make education accessible to the people who want
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
The universities are more about saying we want to sell degrees.
Yeah.
But they've been very successful. This is the problem. That economy is a strong economy now. It means that the community colleges, they're doing something that to me seems a little bit more noble, but
Hmm.
they can't compete with the universities. How do you see that the way I've just described it?
I think it's all true. I think all of higher ed is selling degrees. All of it is, um, because they tell college athletes that come full ride scholarships that we're
Mm.
providing you with a free education, which you're
Hmm.
not. You're
Yeah,
providing free access to
yeah, right,
education.
right.
If you give me a book and say it's free, but I never read it, all you did was give me a book. I didn't get the education from the book. You
Sure,
just provided the book. And
sure.
so what they're all of it is selling degrees. The problem
Yeah.
that they're having now is that students now realize it. In this COVID, right? Now
Hmm.
you have people that may not have been paying attention to a guy like Elon Musk, who's telling all these students, you don't, a college degree is a waste of time.
Right.
Now you hear this billionaire saying it's a waste of time, right? And then you see how much you're in debt,
Yeah.
right? And so the schools have been some of their, like when you're in medical, that stuff you do need a degree for because
Yeah.
there's
This
certain
is it.
stuff that, yeah,
I
that
agree.
you
As I said, where colleges began, when the
mm-hmm,
concept of higher education was introduced, and I mean, it's we're talking hundreds of years ago.
mm-hmm,
Um, Obviously had a value, and there are
mm-hmm,
certainly industries now and professions now where I completely support.
mm-hmm,
There's I'm in no way want to abolish the concept of a degree,
mm-hmm,
but I think that there are many, many degrees that have been introduced now. I mean, there are fields of study that have been introduced in the last couple of years, and they don't seem to provide any kind of life skills or professional skills. They are just they're selling a degree, an invented degree that no one's really getting any, as far as I can tell, any
mm-hmm.
benefit from. And so is that I have a problem with. As you say, medicine, the two that always come to top of my mind, medicine and law. I
Mm-hmm.
always think, yeah, sure, you want to study medicine, you want to study law, you go to university, you read your books. But it seems that that's a minority of professions that really need that.
Well, in the problem the United States has had is that the higher education, there was a level of classism that
Hmm.
started it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the level of classism was even if you were a poor white person, there was an elitism to universities. That's why there
Right.
was only certain families that had access to the higher education. The problem was in the when the internet age came about, and now the information was free. that literally you don't have to go to a university to get the very same
Right.
information.
Exactly right.
What the universities didn't do and what higher ed didn't do in general was try to innovate now what they give. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
you can get the information, but let's give you some practicum to it. Build
Right.
these labs
Which is
that
what
can
it should
help
be.
you
Yeah, absolutely.
what it should be.
Yeah.
That we can give you some experiential teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Some places they do that, some degree plans they do that.
Yeah.
But it should be part of every single one, because other than that, you're not getting any value for it. And
Mm-hmm.
then what's starting to happen is when you've got all these students who are now searching the net, and like no other time in history are wealthy people telling you how they got their wealth. Before, they told each other. You went to a university to find out. Now it's all over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So now students are literally thinking, is this even worth it?
Right.
Is it worth me going here to do this and get this degree and do that?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? I mean, because in my phone, I can get 100,000 likes on Instagram. And if I sell something and I sell it 10,000 times, that's more money that I would make in the career field in a year that I was trying to get into. So why would I do that? And then
secondly, and you're spending money as well, right? You're spending money to get that degree where you could be making money without it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And then the second part was the education we have was made to manufacture employees.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, the spirit of the United States is entrepreneurship.
Mm.
So if you haven't shifted your education not to make entrepreneurs, but to build the entrepreneur mindset, if you actually did that, you would understand that would help you make better employees.
Yeah, right.
But because they don't, what happens is, and third, this generation is not loyal. You can't just tell them to get into a job, stay there 30 years. They've watched their parents do that and they don't want it. So they're going to actually do individually what's very best for them. But you set in program the 30-year life or the retirement life from one place. And because you educate it that way, it's not happening now. So now what do? Well, they're not asking students. They're asking each other, you're not the people that need to be in the room. You need to talk to the student and do that. And COVID has given us all a chance to innovate. The problem is they're not brave enough to do it. If you fail, if we were to fail in new program processes and everything in education, the default is blame COVID. So why not just go for it?
Yeah, right. I want to respond as well to what you said about loyalty there, because you're right about how that model has changed, where we would have seen even just our parents' generation would have been more likely, but certainly a generation before that, they're likely to get their first job and stay at it, potentially for life, right? As you say, that's not so likely anymore. The point about loyalty, though, I would suggest as well, is because this generation is identifying that the employers are not loyal to them, right? It's a one-way loyalty. So if you find an employer who's actually looking out for you, providing for you and giving you the benefits and the experience as an employee, then we do see loyalty, right? We see then from the current generation, the millennials and the youths getting into employment now. On the one hand, as you said, they're less loyal. They're more likely to look for the job that's best for them. But on the other hand, when they're in a place that provides for them, when they're in a job that suits them, they're contributing so much more than previous generations, where previous generations would have spent their life coming in, doing what they need to do to get through the day and then go home, and they'll do that 5 days a week for 30 years of their life. Now you get the current generation. It might be harder to get them to stay in one place, but when they find that place, they come in and they're giving their everything, right? They're innovating, they're creating, they're creating new systems, new processes. More, they're not just clocking in, right? So there's actually just a more of a demand for loyalty to go two ways, right? I want my boss, my employer, to be loyal to me if they expect me to be loyal to them. I think that's the full shift there.
Right. And then they're also looking for upward mobility.
Yes.
Right. I think this generation is unsatisfied, which is a great thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. I think generations before may have been satisfied, and it's part of the marketing. They were marketing, get your degree, get into the middle class, retire, get some life insurance, pay off your house. That's it. This generation doesn't want that. They want
No.
that plus. I want that plus I want to travel the world. I want
That's
that
right.
plus
Yeah.
I want to make $1 million. I want that, plus I want to be able to leave a bunch of wealth and generational wealth and all that type of stuff. That's why companies like Google that, will tell their employee, okay, you work for us for 4 days a week. On the
Hmm.
fifth day of the week, you work for something, you work on anything.
You work for you, right? Yeah, right.
You work
right.
for you. And then if we like what you produced, we'll put your name on it and everything else. Those
Right.
type of companies are going to thrive.
Right.
It's not the mom and pops. It's the old mindset companies that think that there's almost a mindset that if you don't work for us, that you're not going to eat, you're not going to live, as if you're the only employer
Yeah.
in this region. You may be the
Yeah.
biggest one.
Yeah.
But I think this generation is saying, I was living before I was
Yeah.
employed here.
Right.
I'm
And
not
I
going to
mean,
die
that's
if
it.
I leave.
I feel like when I first got into work, feel like maybe this generation, when I first got into work, was just seeing the precipice where those who were older than me, who were already working
Mhm.
for that company and had been there for some of them for decades before I came along, there was that sense of the fear of losing your job, right?
Right.
This is my employment, and I've got a family, and if I lose my job, my whole world's going to collapse. Now that's a real fear, that's a real
Right.
threat, but I never felt that way. And I think that it's more characteristic of the current generation to say, if I lose my job, that sucks. And I can't just walk into another job tomorrow. Granted, it's not an easy thing to just switch and find a new job. But there's less fear because there is more of a sense of, I'll find a way, and you are not the only gig in town, right? There is, you can't hold that over my head. And sure, some are going to suffer from that. It's a little bit cavalier. On the one
Mhm.
hand, it's a bit incautious, because if you
Right.
do lose your job and you end up without an income, well, that's no game. But I think there is more bravery around that idea at the moment of saying, look, if this doesn't work out, if you don't like the way I'm doing things, you can't hold that over me.
Right. Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the internet helped that.
Yeah.
Because like before, you would have to, decades before, you'd have to print out a resume. You'd have to go to the place, during your lunch hour or something like that, and hand them a resume, cover letter, all that type of stuff. This day and age, as long as you've got LinkedIn,
Right.
LinkedIn will help promote that you're looking
Exactly
for
right,
another
yeah,
job.
yeah.
So,
And also, I think that, again, I think about being perhaps in the first wave of that attitude change,
mhm.
where, because it was still a new idea, we'd have been a minority amongst the workforce,
Mhm.
And so if I get ballsy and, stand up to the boss and I wield that attitude, chances are I'm going to lose my job, because the boss isn't
Right.
going to take it, because who am I?
Right.
But as the workforce gets gradually replaced, where everybody feels the way I do, suddenly the old workforce that was beholden to the employer, now the employer is beholden to the workforce, because
Yes.
if we all turn and say, well, right, we're off,
Mhm.
well, then what, the same goes for them. If they don't have a workforce, now they're the ones that are suffering. They can't
Right.
they can't function without us. And so it's
Right.
that realization, you need us as much as we need you.
Mhm.
But I think it only becomes true at like a critical mass point, because it's
Yeah.
if you're the first person who says to the boss, you need me as much as I need you, the boss goes, no, don't, and they can
Right.
kick you out. But now
Right.
I think there's more and more people leaving school, entering into the workplace, that have that attitude, that now it's becoming a real truth, I think. And employers are either having to get with that, or see themselves suffering as the workforce kind of leaves them behind.
Right. And I think the skill set of the employee is far more advanced than
Yeah.
sometimes the employer gives them credit for.
Yeah, right. So true.
You write your resume and your cover letter to get the job, but you don't put everything that you can do
Right,
to
right.
get the job. You're just trying to get
Right.
the job. Then when you get in there in conversation, the boss can tell, wait a minute, this person is a little bit more creative. This
Yeah.
person has done a little bit more. How did you do that? The intelligent boss or the
Yes.
intelligent employer says, how did you do that? Now, this is the framework. Give me an idea.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can chop it and frame it. Can you put it into this? when you do that, both the employee gets better and the employer gets better. But for instance, in higher ed, part of the problem is that you have people that are just now learning as educators, just now learning Twitter, and we're on TikTok. Where have you been?
Right.
You know what I mean? We're past Snapchat. Why are you still talking about that? We're somewhere else. So if you're still at the Twitter innovation age and limit, then when you say, well, how do we market this program to students? Well, you're already unqualified for it.
Yeah, right. It's very true. Yeah.
Right.
And there's something as well about education just seems to move a little bit slower. I mean, on the business side, the commercial side of things, just because of the nature of time, it's been a while now. The millennial generation are now the first millennials, and now they're not the employees looking for their first job anymore. They are the employers. They've got their own startups. They're the ones employing new staff now, and so they are at the top of the hierarchy with this mentality where they are thinking the way that you've just described. They see an innovative member of staff working on the workforce, maybe some new intern, somebody who's just joined the company a few weeks ago, but shows some innovation, some ability to work beyond their job description, where that would have been shut down before. Now we've got the same mentality in the the CEOs and the directors, who will pick up and do something with that, and they will facilitate the growth of the staff, the employee, which of course is good for the company because they're getting more out of it.
Right.
But education seems to move damn sight slower than the commercial world. And so the educators, the administrators in the schools don't seem to be picking up that mentality as quickly as the commercial world is.
Well, like you said before, because of the degree economy, then you're thinking more
just trying to hold on to it. Yeah, that's right.
Just trying to hold on to it. And you're basing everything, even the what you're teaching, you're thinking more curriculum design than the actual curriculum.
Yeah.
And because you can't really make money off of the curriculum, you have to go with the design. Because the design you can present to your investors, the design you can go to your state and local government to guarantee your dollars.
Yeah.
If we started focusing more on the curriculum, then getting a degree would be part of what you do because of the level of curriculum. For instance,
exactly right. Yeah.
If before, we have financial literacy programs and stuff like that. The problem I have with them, a lot of times they don't include two main criteria for financial literacy. They don't include taxes and they don't include investing. So you're really not giving me financial literacy. You're giving me budgeting with financial literacy on top of it.
Yeah.
If we actually taught where you can actually be an investor from your phone, think about, you used to have to go to Vanguard. You had to have, $10,000, $100,000 to invest. Now you can invest for $5 because you can buy a fractional share. Why aren't we teaching students that?
Yeah.
And if we were teaching them that, then we would be making generational moves.
Yes.
Instead of just dealing with the student. And if we had something, and I know the bigger universities have it, but if we made it just the criteria that if you graduate from this college, right? Let's say a parent graduates from this college, then your student, your son or daughter automatically gets 50, 75% off of their tuition when they come in. Then you wouldn't have to worry about enrollment. What happened with COVID is a lot of these students mid-semester got kicked out of class, got kicked out of the dorms. They couldn't graduate. This was their final year to graduate. During the summer, all the universities and colleges were saying, come back to school. And the student was saying, why? You didn't, what am I coming back to? You don't know what's going to happen in the fall. If the COVID spikes, I got to leave again. I don't have the resources to do this. So tell me why I should go. And so we were scrambling, trying to enroll students when all we had to do is tell them, but listen, this is what we're going to do in the fall. This is what we're going to do as far as it'll be 100% remote. So you know what you're buying. The students now, I think, are saying, okay, I already didn't really want to go to school, because if there's another way to get the income I want without going to your school, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of been like, wait a minute. It used to be that you had to have a degree to get that level of income. Now even the companies are saying, wait a minute, you're sending us a bunch of people that they're not problem solvers. They just can identify the problem. We don't need anybody that can identify the problem. That's what I get paid
Right.
for.
Yeah.
I
Right.
need somebody to help me solve this, and you're
Yeah.
not educating problem solvers.
Yeah.
And so what's happening with the degree economy is you're hiring a bunch of high income people. And now what they're saying is, we paid you a lot and you can only do a little. So now let's go pay somebody a little who can do a lot and grow them into this position, because we can keep them longer.
Right. And because they've not been forced into the degree economy, you know, they're not looking for a job that's going to help them pay back their university debts, right? Because when you hire somebody with a degree, one of the reasons that they want their higher salary, apart from the status illusion that the degree economy builds, the other fact is they've sunk however many thousands of dollars into their degree debt, that their first order of business is, right, I need to earn money and pay off my degree debt, right? If you're employing people who don't have that debt in the first place, then they don't have the same financial burden from day one. If you can open up and say, look, we'll give you a job without the degree, we'll pay you less, but you don't need as much, and we'll help you grow. And maybe 4 years from now, 4 years that you could have spent in college spending money on your degree, come and spend 4 years with us, learn how to be good at the job, then you'll earn the money because you'll be doing the job, right? You'll be good at the job, and you'll be earning money all along that 4 year period as well, rather than spending it. I mean, the model that we are currently so committed to, it seems to me to be a bit of a house of cards. I mean, you only need to pull a little bit to see the whole thing fall apart. But so far, I don't see anybody pulling. But it's on the edge. And I think you've mentioned a couple of points here about COVID, for example. And I think this could be the first card to fall.
Well, I think what's happening is students are kind of doing that now, at least in the States. So for instance, one whole division of university football called the Pac-12, the football players, which brings in a whole lot of money, millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
Told the division, listen, we're not going to play unless you can guarantee two things. One, our health and safety. Well, you can't really guarantee that, right? Two, guarantee that we'll receive our scholarship, because a lot of those football players and basketball players and track stars, they're only going to your university to get the free education. But what the university does to the student is they hang that scholarship over their head. They're in a scholarship slavery. Right. So if you get hurt or something like that happens and they snatch your scholarship, that's it.
Yeah.
You can't afford the school because the school already was $50,000 a semester. The only reason why you're going is because somebody else is paying for it. And they keep that right over your head. If you're partying too much, you're not performing, they keep it right over your head. If the coach changed, they keep it right over your head. I've had friends before that went to schools. They did well the season before. A new coach came in and took their scholarship because he brought some people with him.
I mean, you see the scholarship. If you're the individual who's getting the scholarship, you get that call or you get that letter that tells you you've got the scholarship. Obviously, you're celebrating, right? I mean, that's a world changer for you, and it seems generous on the part of the college. But of course, to give one student a free scholarship to come and study for free, the benefit that the college gets if they happen to have the best team, if they've got the best team in whether it's the state or whatever region, if they've got the best team, then how much money are they getting from students who want to come to the college with the best team? Meanwhile, you feel good that they've given you a free ride, you and 12 of your friends, or 12 your 20 teammates or something. They're getting millions and millions out of all of the students who want to come because you're at that college. I mean, you're their selling point. And yet you feel, oh, thank you so much, thank you for, and yeah, of course I won't party and I will because oh, thank you so. And yet you're the reason that they're able to do it in the first place, right?
Yep. And I think students they're recognizing it. It's just, I think the smarter people in the whole thing, there's two entities that have the opportunity in here. One is the community college or the junior college level because of their price point. And because you can get your first 2 years and a credential and an associate's, the more education and information they pack in that price point, they'll never have to worry about a university. If they concentrate on not overselling, but under promising, over delivering. If they give you far more information, far more education, if you can leave a community college with a degree, a real level financial literacy, possibly some investments already because it doesn't cost that much, you're in a far better stance than you would be at just being a normal student at a university.
Sure.
The second people or entity that can do it is the industries themselves. If somebody like Amazon, me and Mike Yates talked about this before.
Oh yeah, I know Mike.
If Amazon or Google decided to make their own university, actually make their own education pipeline. I mean, send kids from elementary school through university. There would be nobody that could compete with them because if you go, if you educate them, not just on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, reading, math, science, and all that, but the culture of Google, you're birthing employees.
That's it.
If you're birthing employees, even if you don't get them in the K through 12, but you say, hey, you come to Google University and we guarantee you a minimum of this amount. Now, if you want to go here, you may have to go get a higher level education. That's whatever. But just because part of our initiative for you being accepted as a student here is you're guaranteed a job, there's a lot of places that will close.
Absolutely,
because you're trying to get to the Google, you're trying to get to the Facebook, you're trying to get to the Amazon.
Right. Yeah.
So if you
meanwhile, Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're not benefiting from the current model because what they're getting, even out of some of the top colleges, what they're getting aren't competent, skilled graduates. They're getting people who've coasted through on their dollar, on their scholarship, on the name of their parents. They're not the most capable people in the country, right? They're just the most credentialed people in the country.
Right.
If Google can hand select and turn those students into competent, capable people, so that by the time they graduate, they fall straight into Google and they know that they're competent and capable. And it's not just a credential. I mean, it's everybody wins.
Right. And so a lot of these corporations, they have what they call corporate university. And what the corporate university is, they have a corporate partnership with maybe a university or a college.
I see.
For what that company does. So let's say you're UPS. You may have a corporate university where you give a discount to your employees that go to this school for logistics, right? While that's good, is it the best for UPS?
Right.
Why don't you just create your own?
Right.
So
you're
that people are learning
right?
their own system. Right. And so if you're somebody like the bigger names, the UPS, the FedEx, and the Amazons and all those people, if you put a certificate out with somebody's name on it, there's an employer now I'm talking about for the student that's going to recognize that.
Of course, yeah. An industry, they're
going to take a Google.
Taking education out of it, right? That if somebody's worked at Google, forget their education, but they've worked at Google and on their CV is Google, then the next IT company is going to snap them up. Oh, you worked at Google. So if you didn't just work at Google, but you were educated by Google, right? Who's going to say, sorry, I'd rather you went to Harvard. No.
Right.
That Google is giving you all the benefit we need as an IT company.
Right. And the problem the universities are having is that's what the students want. We're selling education and we're selling degrees as if that's what the student wants.
Yeah.
The student really wants a level of income, but they've been told they've got to go through you to get it.
The only way of getting
it. So they really don't care about the education part because they can go to get the books and everything. They're just checking boxes off. So what they're doing is they're walking the stage with a credential, but really can't do the job because they were told all they need is the credential to get the job. And that's the problem. The more experiential teaching we have, the more internships, even the more study abroad and the broadening of the student's mind that we have, the better employees we have, which means the better employers we have, which means the better economy that we have. Yeah.
Problem is the universities collapse in that model, right?
Well, they have an opportunity not to.
Well, you're right, actually. Yeah, if they see it the right way and follow the trend, exactly right. Yeah, and that makes me wonder. In fact, with all of that in mind, at the college you work at, what are the What are the popular courses there? What are people coming to study at your campus?
Well, for our campus, we have been in existence since the 1800s, and it's called a historically Black college and university.
Oh,
So there
okay.
were
Yeah,
two
I've heard of
schools
this. Okay, okay.
in San Antonio. One is San Antonio College, where they pushed more of the academic to the white students. They
Mm-hmm.
made St. Philip's College more of a trade school,
Sure.
sewing, stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
hands-on
Yeah.
manufacturing, not gonna get that
Yeah.
high. Well, we've evolved to have a real big, huge nursing program.
Oh,
So a
wow.
lot of our students can go in. We have basically a functioning hospital. If
Oh, wow.
all hell broke loose, our building could be turned into a functioning hospital. They wouldn't have to put
Wow.
any more equipment in it. They would literally just have to put a doctor there. The nurses are already there. We
Wow.
have that. Then we have a partnership with Ford where we have auto mechanics and auto technology. We have that on our campus. And then we have a whole nother campus that does with manufacturing, architecture, what else? Bunch of manufacturing, architecture, and nursing. So we've got a bunch of hands-on programs.
Yeah.
That literally a student goes, gets a certificate, and goes straight to Toyota, UPS, places like that. So we have a lot of those students, but then we have a lot of students that may be military, that they took some classes or that their military service counts as college credit.
Okay. Okay.
And so they're coming over here to finish a credit before they go to university.
I see.
Because of their benefits that they can get. They can use financial aid for us, use their major military ones for the more expensive universities. And then there's not traditional students that basically they just, they left high school, went through life. They may have gotten in trouble with the law, maybe not. Maybe they took high school seriously, maybe they didn't. So they may get their equivalency exam for high school. And now they're realizing how education does affect your economics.
Right.
And so they're coming back to try to get a credential. So it's kind of a blend of the three. The problem that we had was we have a bunch of labs that have hands-on stuff because those degrees require it. COVID hit in the middle of a lot of those students.
You can't do that online in the same way.
Can't do it online. So the good thing is our administrative was intelligent. And so basically the only students on campus are those lab students. So they get to put their hands on everything and they can go ahead and finish their credential and that type of stuff.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
So our president actually left NASA and became our college president. So that's the level of education and insight we have that's leading us. So it's a good place to work. It's for a community college. We're one of the best community college systems in the nation.
Excellent.
It's just that because it's San Antonio, people don't equate San Antonio with that. And because our urban core is the most impoverished, they're trying to equate the two. So now what we're trying to really do is tackle poverty through education. And right now it's the access to education.
Yeah, that's amazing. So your graduates, do they then mostly get employed in the same region? Are they mostly, you mentioned like Toyota and a couple of are they local employers that your graduates are then moving into? Is that a common trajectory?
I don't know all of the data of it, but San Antonio, it used to be a real humongous military town. We used to have 5 military bases there. So they've concealed them or condensed them to like 3. You can't join the Air Force in the United States. When you join the Air Force, you come to San Antonio to do your basic training. So some of it is civil service. A lot of it is medical. We've got a bunch of hospitals here. So for those students, they tend to stay. But for other students, it really just depends on kind of where the wind takes you. The next closest Silicon Valley in the east portion of the United States is Austin, Texas, which is about 60 miles from us.
Right. Okay. So that's what I wanted to ask. You've mentioned Austin a few times, and I don't know the geography of the state, so I was wondering how far away you are. So, how that's growing now? Am I right? That as far as I've heard, that's kind of a new area of growth, right? So, how has that affected San Antonio and your demographic that we've been talking about?
It's helped a lot. One of the wealthiest zip codes is a city called Bernie, which is like, from where I'm at, it's probably 30 minutes northwest from us. It's wealthier than the Hamptons in New York, which is weird. Because what they did was they took a bunch of ranches and they've had them for centuries, and now they're breaking them up. And so a lot of the wealthy people are moving there because the tax situation is better than California or New York. So you get that. but because the proximity of Austin and the IBMs, Dell, Facebook, Tesla are so close in Austin that the area between Austin and the 60 miles to San Antonio, all that's thriving because it doesn't take that long to get to either city.
Right.
So it really depends on your industry. If you're IT, you could theoretically graduate from here in San Antonio, live here,
and still work,
drive to Austin every day. It's a commute.
Yeah.
It's also the state capital, but it's possible. So because of the growth of Austin and because of our cost of living is so low compared to Austin's, it's affected us well. It's just a matter of we need more students, and our demographics don't really study STEM.
Okay.
Because a lot of Hispanics or Latinos and African Americans, they don't get into those industries. So that part could be affected.
Okay.
But the medical portion of it and the manufacturing portion of it, that part is good.
Okay. Okay, good. And I wonder if I can ask a little bit about your own experience. Obviously, you've talked about the urban core there, and we've talked a little bit about the African American experience there. Obviously, being African American yourself, and you said the college you're working at now, you graduated from. So would I be right to think that you grew up there where you're now living? Have you lived there since you were young?
I've been here in the San Antonio area since I was 3 months old. I was born in Grand Forks, North Dakota.
Okay.
And my parents were both in the Air Force. And so they met there, got married there, and then my mother, I think it was my mother, got stationed here. And then because of the cost of living, they decided just to settle. So I've been here since 1980. And then I got married and we moved to Honolulu, Hawaii for about a year and a half. Matter of fact, I was in Hawaii during 9/11.
Okay. Okay. So then now you're back home, as it were. So how have you seen change in the area since you were there as a kid? And do you see the experience as an African American changing in that area much? Is it a better experience now, or what?
It's changed a whole lot. San Antonio, because of the cost of living, San Antonio Houston is world famous. Austin is becoming more famous. Dallas has a bunch of Fortune 500 headquarters there because of the tax structure of Texas. Texas is a great state to headquarter your business because the tax structure is so favorable. But San Antonio, we don't get hit with the cost of living of having those big industries here. So we're fairly cheaper in comparison to the rest. So because of that, a lot of industries are now looking to us to come in. So the opportunities are growing. The city is growing. There's construction all over the place, which is a good thing. It can be bad for commute, but the growth of it,
it's good for the future.
And we're growing in every direction. It's not just like one area.
Right.
For African American, as far as the experience, it's more of, because Houston and Dallas have more pronounced African American citizenry, people don't think that we exist in San Antonio. So when people move here, because it's predominantly Hispanic or Latino community, they don't think we exist. So the networking opportunities, a lot of times, you don't get unless you put yourself out there. Now, if you know one person, you probably know 10 because they know each other. It's just a matter of knowing that one person. So the experience, I think, is great. I think if you're intelligent and you know how to invest and you know how to network, it's a great place to launch.
Right.
But if you're leaving here to go somewhere else, the pay is lower than other cities, but the cost of living is lower. So you get to keep more in your paycheck living here than as opposed if you live in other cities. So it really just depends on where you're coming from to here and what your mindset is here. So if you leave like a place like New York or Atlanta or LA and you got paid $100,000 somewhere else, and now you're getting paid 70, you're looking at the 30,000 that you supposedly lost. But that's also 30,000 you didn't have to spend when you. So it really just depends on your mindset.
Okay, good,
Mhm.
good. Now, obviously, you and I connected on LinkedIn, and that's where we first made
Mhm.
contact. And I see there on LinkedIn, you received an award from the GFEL forum. You were nominated.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that was interesting. So I got uh an inbox on LinkedIn in January. Well,
Okay.
yeah, late January. That I was pre-nominated for the GFEL, but I'd never heard of it.
Okay.
So when they sent it, I was like, oh, okay. I I guess,
Hmm.
I don't know anything about you guys. Who nominated me? They didn't say. So then we started talking about it, and they said you can go ahead and fill out your the other part of your nomination. So I went ahead and did that, and they were supposed to have their conference in June in Las Vegas.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Well, the COVID
Yeah.
hit. And so
Yeah.
when COVID hit, it was like, well, I can't go because I'm working remote and that other type of stuff. And you couldn't pick up the award unless you went to the conference. And I was like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
thank you for the nomination, but I know for a fact I can't go.
Sure.
So then they changed it and they said, well, we can do it virtual now. So I went ahead with the process, and then they awarded me the top 100 for educators. So at
Hmm.
first I thought it was for the Spark at University, the quote unquote side hustle that I do to help students. But
Hmm.
I said, well, I don't have any real income because I haven't really been promoting it, because the curriculum and stuff I had in it was based off of my experiences from like 2015.
Hmm.
So virtual internships, virtual study abroad didn't exist then.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right. Right.
because there's a possibility that that may never go away, I had to try to figure out some time. I'm still even trying to figure out some time of how that works so I can tell students how to use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I talked to them about it, they said, well, no, 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 no. Just give us your past, what you did in your past. So they basically named me that this year for the stuff I did as a student
I
back
see. I see.
in 2015 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful for it. I met maybe one more person that received the award.
Hmm.
But it looks like their funding and everything, their first conference was in Dubai last year.
Okay.
Their
Wow.
second one was supposed to be at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas this year.
Vegas. Okay.
And then I always look when see those type of conferences and stuff, who funds them and where they're from. And a lot of the funding came from India. So I'm
Oh, okay.
still in my mind
Yeah. I
trying to
mean,
wrap
yeah.
around who do I know that was in India
Yeah.
that could
Yeah.
have nominated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's good that I mean, I like that these forums are, I like that they exist. I like that there are teachers getting recognitions like this, because you see, the Forbes lists and athletes lists, there are a lot of lists of the top something, top 100, top 10, top whatever people. And I think that teachers and educators should be
Mm-hmm.
recognized in that way. There should be lists. So I'm very glad that these things exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's great that you've been one of them, that you're on one of those lists.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you. And I
all right.
think this
So
this is the type of stuff that helps students as well. So,
exactly right.
like
Yeah.
for instance, if you got named top 100 in your field as a student, what is
Right.
more
Exactly
important,
right.
the degree or
Yeah.
that top 100?
Exactly
That
right.
top
Exactly
100
right.
is the same weight as
Yeah.
that is that degree.
Exactly right.
So
Yeah.
it's one of those hallway things I was saying about
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
Had I not had the opportunity to be in the halls and do that, I wouldn't have
Hmm.
been named top 100 this year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's right. That's right. Now, the more that we can do to give our students a leg up that doesn't necessarily rely on the traditional degree, I think is great value that we're providing. And it sounds like that you are, through the college you work with and the consultant that you do, the support that you give to the students. So look, thanks for talking to me about it. It's been a real
Mhm.
eye opener. There's a lot there, especially because I don't know much about the US. I've learned a lot about how the systems work there, but it does also seem that a lot of what we've talked about could be true for vast portions of the world, right? A lot of these things
Yeah.
they're not US specific.
Mhm.
We're seeing a lot of the same challenges and a lot of the same troubles and some of the same benefits and opportunities as well, all around the world. So that's been really enlightening. All right.
Mhm.
Listen, if people want to follow up on this and they want to find you, where should they go and look?
Best place is LinkedIn.
Okay.
Best place is LinkedIn. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'll link
I'm
to that in
as
the.
active or more active on LinkedIn than I am anything else.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think the same's true for me. Good. So I'll link to that in the show notes. And
Okay.
yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Naphtali.
It's been a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Yeah, speak to you again. Bye now.
Okay, have a good one.